This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Welcome back to the Misfit Nation. If you're a veteran and you're struggling or feel like you're leading a path towards the darkness, stop and think about those who are around you. Think about how they truly value you, how they will miss you. You are not alone. You need to talk to someone. Someone will listen to you. If you feel like those who are in your inner circle or your family feel like you are a burden to them, or you're embarrassed to tell them how you feel, call the hotline at 1-800-273-8255 and press option 1. Someone will take care of you. Do not make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you're a new listener, thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast apps, to include the Military Broadcast Radio app, and check out our family of shows there, all headlined by DJs who are veterans, and I always have great content on there. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at _Misfit Nation. This will keep you up to date with our latest news, episodes, and of course, stories of our guests. Speaking of which, this show is part of a Memorial Day series for the month of May, where you're bringing in fellow service members and family members of those who have lost fellow people or their brothers and sisters or family members to share their story. Our next guest has continued to serve for the past 19 years. He began his career in the Marine Corps as an infantryman, where he served as point man in the Battle for Fallujah in 2004. For those of you who do not remember, this is one of the largest efforts in the battle in Iraq. He later transitioned into the National Guard as an intelligence warrant officer. Christian has completed 3 combat tours and multiple humanitarian assistance missions. So without further ado, let's welcome Christian Dominguez to the Misfit Nation. Welcome, Christian.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, man. Honestly, it's been a long journey to even get here, and 19 years later, I've only started doing these kinds of engagements in the last 2 years, and almost opened the doors out to my healing process, and it's really starting to open the doors to a lot of my brother's healing process of just realizing, guys, it's okay. Like, we can talk about this stuff. And for me, in the last 2 to 3 years, it's really changed my entire life. So I appreciate you having me on to serve as another step in my healing process. I can talk to other people, talk to strangers about kind of what I'm going through, what I've experienced, and to honor some of those that we lost.
And 19 years goes by in a blink of an eye, as you can tell in the military, where you started out as a young man and with great dreams and aspirations, and you turn old really quick. Your body takes a lot of beating, especially as a Marine Corps infantryman. At that point in 2004, I know in Ramadi, I was with 2-4 Marines, and there were a lot of kicking doors and pushing the walls and go all the time. Don't ask questions, just do it. And I'm sure with 1-8, you were doing the same things in Fallujah just a few months later in November during the big roll up and into there. So I know your body has been through hell, and I know what you're doing now. It kind of gives you some leeway to kind of relax a little bit and heal some of them physical wounds, but the mental wounds are still there, of course. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your story from why did you join the Marines in the first place, and all the dudes you met and those who we are no longer with.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in New York. I was in 10th grade during 9/11, and in Long Island, I was able to see the smoke from the sky, but not someone who could really conceptualize what was happening. The United States was kind of blind to all our politics, what was going on. So no one really knew. But I didn't have a good track to college. I wasn't that kid that was studying. I had one book that lasted me the whole high school career. There was 1 page of notes. You start off your career, you write your name at the top of the page. This is the day 1. I'm going to do something so good. By day 3, you stop studying. So I didn't really have a good path to passing. And I had a buddy who joined the Marine Corps, and I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. And during that time, it's still no different than it is now, just different platforms. You still wanted to feel pride, and you wanted to feel wanted and appreciated. And, the Marines were the ones in the uniform walking around the mall. So I said, this is the one you want to do, So I joined the Marine Corps. I went to boot camp August 2003, and I deployed to Iraq in June 2004, right? It was such a quick turnover. My senior guys had returned back from Mosul. They were in there in 2003, and we joined. I went to School of Infantry. I got to the fleet in May of 2004, and I deployed 3 months later. You talk about kicking down doors in Fallujah, this huge battle, but in reality, you were so scared of your senior guys. We never had downtime that I was way more scared of the guys behind me than what I was going to kick down the door. I could win inside the house, but those ones, you start messing with them too much, you got additional duties, you got fire watch, and they have a wider left and right limit for what they can do in the fleet than in like a controlled environment school or something. So, the crazy thing about war and combat is like all of us, right? We have such a tight connection to those we lost that we served with. But like my best friend who died that I'm gonna talk about, like I actually only knew him for like 2 months, right? This is like a crazy thing. I knew him for like 2 months in the real world, and then we're in combat. We never even had a beer together. So it's so crazy that 19 years later, the strongest connections I have in the military, those from those few months in Fallujah. And there's been some I served with for 15 years later that still don't have the same connection as those guys that were kicking down the doors and beating their bodies up like the rest of us.
And like you said,
So
it only takes like a week of hanging out with some dude, maybe got KP with them or something, or had to do something on the ship together, and next thing you know, you're brothers for life, and that's what happened.
that's it. Yeah, you might play spades a couple times, talk some trash, and next now you're blood brothers. Right. So my first deployment, we didn't really know what was going on. We didn't know the politics. We actually went to Ramadi in 2004. There was a whole bunch of politicking going around, like, hey, there's 1,000 fighters in this city called Hit, and they're in Rawa, then they were Ramadi. So like we were kind of chasing these operations, but nothing happened with us. So we're writing our letters home to this. We went to this battle of Ramadi in 2004, but nothing. There wasn't even a one person in the whole city. So we're like, oh, okay, like this doesn't seem like a big deal. And then Fallujah happened, and the same kind of thought process was in our head. Like, okay, yeah, I'll pack my day pack, but I did this 3 times already. But then New York Times reporters came to my platoon. You're like, what are you doing here? And of course, the battle for Fallujah also happened in like May, the first attempt, right? And like I didn't know any of that. We didn't know that this was a big thing, or anyone, it was going to be a big stronghold. So you pack 1 pair of socks. You might put a couple extra batteries in there. And the crazy thing about extreme combat is like, yeah, you have what you think you're going to wear your gear at, and then you go into this huge assault. They're like, hey, here's smoke grenades. You're like, I don't have a pouch for that. And here's this breaching tool, and here's grenades, and here's a flashbang. Who just has a loose extra flashbang thing? So you got things clanking in your cargo pockets, right? Like grenades and everything, just to try to make do. And the assault started, and the days in combat are wild. Like they're like microwave seconds is what I say. Like you put a hot pocket in there, you're like, this has got to be 15 minutes. Combat is like times 10. It's when I talk about these stories, a lot of my memory is gone from them, but the biggest memories I have are just from when people got shot. And sometimes you're like, that was the next day. That's crazy. That seemed like it was a month difference between that. So in my platoon, we lost 4 guys during that month, 4 KA, but probably like 20 others were shot. We got to a point that we were combat and effective, and it was like the makeup of our platoon got really weird. Like we only had 8 riflemen and like 5 saw gunners left, and we were still trying to like clear houses. So the way it worked is like the saw gunners would all create a perimeter, and every rifleman would have to go in and clear the house. Like that was it. And then we wound up getting combat replacements, but it was a wild time. So I'll tell the story about the 4 guys from my platoon, but understand that sometimes you were next to like a guy you never met before, and he gets killed, and now you're working on him. You're like trying to patch him up. You don't even really know the guy's name. Like these are the weird parts of war. Like sometimes like a sniper platoon comes to you, and I'll tell this one story. One time they asked for us to hey, go give these snipers some security. They don't have any security in the basement level. They're going to be up top shooting. Oh, okay, cool. So the sniper's name was Nickzalkowski, and he's on the roof just aiming in, and I'm laying next to him, shoulder to shoulder. And I was about to ask him a question. I was like, that's so cool, you're a sniper. And as I started talking, he got shot in the head. And I'm the only, there's like 2 other people up there. And, it's almost disheartening that I feel like I was one of the last people this guy's like looking to for aid or something. Like you try to do the single best thing you can do, but, I don't really know him. And it's difficult telling their stories. And it almost feels like it's not even my job to tell their story. I feel like I don't rate to tell their story because I wasn't necessarily close to them. So I think what I'll do is I'll talk about the 4 guys in my platoon that we lost that were really close to us. I have to go in order here. So like November 10th, right? Oh man, the Marine Corps birthday. You should see what that looks like in Fallujah. They will bring in an AAV in the middle of a firefight and drop a cake off in the middle of a main supply route. Enemy shooting at the cake. There's rounds everywhere, and you're going to go get the cake and you're going to go eat it. Like that's the thing, you know, like they don't mess up with that. So I remember the sun came up on 10 November, and this guy, Nate Anderson, the street's quiet, the sun's starting to come up. No, it's like the first time no one's shooting. And all of a sudden, as the sun starts to peak, you just hear him let out a "Happy birthday, Devil Dogs!" And the street, like Marines come out of the rooftops, like from everywhere you could see, like, yeah, like screaming, right? And then that night, we wound up getting ambushed down this alleyway, and he actually wound up getting killed. And there was a Marine there. His name was Aubrey McDade. He lived, but he got the Navy Cross for going in there and saving 2 other Marines that were shot. But really brutal stuff, because you know he was the first casualty that we had. You know, as you get up there, there's such a disparity in war between dead enemy and dead United States name tape, or you know, whichever branch it is. You know, you would see the dead enemy and you're like, you know, you're kids still, right? You're 18, 19, and you do things like, hey, where are your friends? Or like you're trying to make light of some situation because what the heck is going on, right? Like my friends are, you know, doing Rubik's cubes at home or something. I don't know what the heck they're doing, and this is what we're doing. And you know, really, really brutal stuff. And he was the first one that we lost. And when we went to Fallujah, we actually had kill numbers, and we put them inside of our flap because we didn't want to say the names of people that were over the radio. So as you called in your CASI back, they didn't want to say Anderson was killed because they didn't want to mess with morale. So as they called it in, they just call your kill number. But like A is so early, it was in alphabetical order. A is so early, you can deduce quickly. So we're all, you know, we hear 1K, you're hearing the 9 line, you're like, you know, kill number 3, and you're like, holy crap, like, no way, how is that even possible, right? Like, we thought we were, you know, invincible, like, what's going on here, you know? And it's just the crazy thing is just the lack of coping or coming together as one and saying, guys, this is what happened. Of course, this is sad. I'm here for you, brother. Let's do this. Like in 2004, it certainly didn't go down like that. You actually just didn't talk about it. You just, you know, the way I tell the story is like, you know, when you got called down to the principal's office, your other buddies were there, and you just walk past and you lock eyes, like you just knew something went down. No one's going to talk about it. And this is the eyes of 19-year-olds, right? Like this is how we interpret things going down. And that was it. Now, we never talked about it. 19 years later, like this stuff's only now coming out through these stories. Like it wasn't like we talked about it then or later on. So then, so that was like November 10th, and keep in mind the dates are always convoluted in there. November 17th comes around for another K in our platoon. This guy's name was Billy Miller. There was supposed to be a sniper that was killed in a minaret. And we had gotten in trouble for our only rules of engagement in Fallujah were that you couldn't engage in mosques. And like the city was erupting, people did what they had to do. And I think that some negative publicity was made during the battle. So they needed to take a picture of this dead sniper in the minaret to kind of prove to everyone, like, guys, this is what everyone's using. Of course, this is why we engaged in the minaret. Now, again, I'm like a PFC. I don't know anything. I'm just, you know, I'm happy to smoke the pine cigarettes and like just, you know, not have fire watch in the next hour. And we're pretty depleted at this point, right? It's actually 7 days in there. I would say 15 guys have been evacuated or something like that. So as these patrols would go out, our numbers were always weird. It wasn't who you trained with. You're like, okay, you're my team leader today, or you take my SOG. It was a whole hodgepodge. So Billy Miller gets to the base of the minaret, and then we had a New York Times reporter. His name was Ashley Gilbertson, and he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna run up there and take a picture real quick. Take a picture of the dead insurgent, and I'll run back down." But we kind of talked him out of it. Billy Miller goes first. I go second. Ashley Gilbertson goes third. And as we're going up there, I'm say halfway down. It's pitch black. but a tank shell had actually hit the top of the minaret earlier, so you can see like a little bit of light. And out of nowhere, there was a guy in the prone, and he just the most patient guy ever. And Billy Miller walked right into his muzzle, and took a couple rounds to the face, pushed us all down the stairs, and the entire process, right? So it wound up pushing us down so far that I had to leave there and want to kind of regather to go back up there to go get his body out of there. But what a process, right? What a tactical disadvantage to try to get a body in a minaret. These things are so tiny. It's so small. So really, really tough. That was Billy Miller. He was from Texas. His dad was a retired cop. And this story actually is what gave my unit a lot of, I would say, ways to cope, because Ashton Gilbertson would go on to write several books about my platoon. And recently I did a BBC episode with him. And he was someone that's really able to keep our legacy going. Like, these guys we were 0311 Marines, like, they could barely get through the alphabet, like they weren't going to write a book or do some kind of show. But Ashton Gilbertson actually came back, and he felt so much guilt from this story that he actually wrote a book called Bedrooms of the Fallen, where he went to all of the Marines and soldiers that died, and he visited their homes and interviewed their parents for like a week and photographed their room, on how their parents maintained that. The last thing that a parent could kind of hold on to was, this is how the room was maintained. And it's almost like, if you go to Mount Vernon, George Washington's house, like George Washington's shirt is still on the floor, right? Like, Martha didn't want to pick it up. She said, this is how everything left. This is how we're going to keep it. And a lot of the parents are very, very much the same. So we owe a lot to Ashley Gilbertson, because he was able to conceptualize what happened and put it in real English, not jargon, to help tell our story. So then November 19th was the most brutal day of my life. We wound up, now we're about maybe 11 days into Fallujah, and they started to let civilians back in. I don't know who made the decision. It is what it is. And the way they would discern the civilians that they went through some checkpoint is they put like a white emblem on their right arm or a white emblem on their left leg, and like you couldn't shoot them. But the rules of engagement in Fallujah were so crazy, you literally could shoot almost anything. It was like you've never seen something like that. So I'm the point man, I'm on patrol, and we're going on down the street, and I see two people, and it was like so shocking because they weren't doing anything. They were just walking on, and I was like, this is really weird. I don't know what's going on. Like, call for hire, and like they checked them, and they're like, they went through the mayor's complex. They're blessed off on, here's their ID. So we let them go, and those guys wound up bunkering down in a house and cause havoc. I went to kick down the first door, and my best friend Dimitrios Gavriel was like, hey man, look to why don't you, this one had a stairwell to the right. He goes, why don't you watch that? He's gonna go in first, then Demarkus Brown will go in second, and then I'll button hook in behind them. And as Gabriel went first, Brown went second, I button hooked in. They kicked down one door, and Gabriel was just mowed down, just PKM in there, just put 15 rounds in him, laying down. Brown actually got shot and fell down. He popped back up and like looked at me, and it was almost like he like came to, and he fell on me. And it was such a painful moment for me, because I'm dragging him out of the house and just watching, my best friend is just getting shot so many times. And it's like, I'm 19, I'm petrified, I don't know what to do. Brown shot once. How do you make a decision in milliseconds to like, what happens here? I take Brown out of the house, and we had like 15 guys go in to get Gabriel's body out of there. But, this guy's throwing grenades. No one else died in that house that went to get Gabriel's body, but a lot of injured from grenades. So now I have Demarkus Brown outside, and I'm trying to tend to his wounds, and I ripped over his flak jacket. And honestly, all the death that were surrounded with were always shot in the face. I've never actually seen a body shot. It was odd for me to see. So I take off his vest, and I was looking at, and I was like, this is so small. Like, you're completely fine. But it was just pumping. I almost couldn't believe in how it was pumping. So we try to like patch him up. But again, right, we're 19. You got to put a pressure dressing on here. And, oh, it's a sucking chest wound. Let's put some plastic down. But how are you sticking plastic to blood? And the training, you never had to stick it. Blood's not sticking. And like, we actually evacuated him, but he wound up dying on the way to the trauma center. So, really difficult stuff. Brown was from Martinsville, Virginia. He was my roommate for those few months. And Gabriel was this complete freak. This guy was 28 years old, which is the oldest human in the Marine Corps. He just joined. He worked on Wall Street during 9/11, and his friend, he was on the phone with his friends as the towers went down. This guy went to Brown University, Ivy League school. He was an Ivy League wrestler, just a complete freak, and smartest guy I ever met. And he joined enlisted as an infantryman to go and fight for these dudes' honor. And he actually took some shrapnel about 4 days prior. He got evacuated, and he came back in that day, and he was killed there. So, his story always hit me hard because he just had such a huge impact on my life. But the reason I'm even here to talk to you today and how I've coped with everything was really that you have to sit down and have to make a hard decision, right? You can have a pity party. You define how long you need your pity party. What do you need for your pity party? How do you self-soothe? You got to play some video games. You need a little bit of alcohol. You need to work out. But then you have to make a hard decision. For me, it was that I had a lot of survivor's guilt. I felt like I was the point man. I was a PFC. We lost 22 from my battalion. Like, I don't get to be the one who doesn't get shot. So I had a lot of guilt. And what I decided to do was study everyone that was killed and say the only way that I can progress forward is to understand the best attributes that every single one had and to give that back to the universe. So I try to be well-read and well-educated like Gabriel. I try to have presence like Demarkus Brown. I try to have knowledge, institutional knowledge like Billy Miller, and just try to influence in the way that I think that they would want to kind of portray that to the world. Because I feel like I owe the world so much of them. And this is 19 years later. The Fallujah was 18 years ago. Really crazy, But that's where I'm at now. I'm finally out of my bubble. I actually just did a podcast where I told all of my stories in depth. And that was freeing for me. I did have to sit there with whiskey, right? It's never the solution, but sometimes you gotta, your stories are in compartments, and those compartments shouldn't really touch each other. But sometimes you got to open the drawer and say, this is the story I'm going to learn about today and remember and dig deeper and try to think of what did it smell like that day and how did I feel? What was I wearing? And then you got to close the drawer, because you can't let that control every bit of you. And sometimes you can open it up to, have a little pity party, and then you got to aggressively move forward with everything,
Yeah, that's a hard thing for anyone to go through. Never mind a 19-year-old that just came into military at that point, and your boots are still wet. You're still being called boot by everyone around you at that point, because you're less than a year in basically, and you didn't even get to pick on anyone else yet, as you're already shooting at people. And then it's a big chore, especially being the point man, like you said, and having those 21 men that lost in 1/8 that year during just that battle, not just that year, that during the 1 month battle. That's a lot to put on your chest. And then, like you said, compartmentalizing that and then trying to live your life the best way possible through their attributes. That's a great thing. That says a lot for you right there, and your upbringing and how you have coped with this over the last 18 years since this occurred.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And it's been a long time. I won't say that I didn't have a long pity party in the beginning, 2008, 2009, trying to find yourself. And, you want to be, your body wants to be defined by this moment. We went to Fallujah. They gave me a Super Bowl ring. I had a letter jacket of sort. Like, you were almost honored for this in the Marine Corps, or anyone, even in my 19 years. Like, I'm still defined by this. People automatically give me credibility or treat me with honor because I have this badge. And at the end of the day, it's the most traumatic time of my life. And it's odd. But you can say, okay, am I defined by this? Or maybe it's time to hang the jacket up and realize, okay, well, what did I get from this? And how could I attribute it to my life now? As opposed to being bogged down by it. Because it'll drag you through the freaking mud if you stay there for too long. You know, you really can't do that. So I think I was able to turn that around, and that's what I try to be the voice for a lot of the people that I serve with. My senior guys aren't there yet, and you know, I've never had to make a decision where I told the guy to go into a house and he died. I think that's a different battle to be fought. Mine was just like I kicked down the door and I was freaking terrified, and it's the luck of the draw about which house, which door you're picking, and I have to deal with that. You know, it is what it is, but you know, how do you do that, and how do you win? You're right. Your brain wants to go to bad places, and you have to be aggressive in being proactive to not let that happen. You know.
Right. And that's what we talk about at the beginning of the show. Every show I start off with don't go to the darkness. So let the darkness grab you. And like, you know, too many of our brothers and sisters have let the darkness grab them and gave in to that enemy within. So if we can help one, that one helps one, we'll get that domino effect and start helping a lot more. And I think, like you said, telling the stories and getting it out, it's a release for us, those who did come home, but really left a lot over there. And as we tell these stories, it helps us and also helps those who love them to hear their stories and feel that they were loved and on the other side as well as at home.
For sure. Yeah, and even normalize it, right? Like 2004, you weren't talking about things. You know, I don't want to blast the Marine Corps yet, but you know what happened when we came back? They said people were like, "Hey, I'm having trouble sleeping." They go, "Oh, then why don't you guard the front gate? It's a 24-hour shift, and if you can't sleep anyway, why don't you do that?" And that's what happened. And it was very much frowned upon. The Marine Corps is very good at killing things. It's very good at it. And then anything else, they really struggle with trying to figure out how to move forward, right? They're still about numbers, and you know, guys were having issues, and it was like, oh, okay, well, are you going on the next deployment? Because if not, you know, you're gonna have to kind of go somewhere else. So I think we went through a lot of that stuff, and now it's just like, okay, here we are 18 years later, and I try to coach people up because here's the difficulty. Of course, we want to be there with people, but I don't think people are really proactive enough in helping each other, right? It's always like, hey, I'm here for you if you need me, but we really have to be conscious of being proactive and just helping our brothers, right? Or helping our sisters, like random check-ins with actual substance. Hey man, checking in on you, man. Last time we talked, I know you did this. Where are you at? Where are you going with this? Anything I can help facilitate that? This is where I'm at. Real conversation. You know, I think that of course we want to help out. And a lot of us don't know what to say. A lot of us aren't comfortable being vulnerable yet. We got to do it. It's what great leaders do, right? You have to be vulnerable. You have to be empathetic. And I think that those are the steps in the right direction, right? And, you know, the hardest part about it is actually staying consistent. Look, we've all dealt with people that you call them on Wednesday and they, dude, thanks so much for calling me. You're like, yeah, and you felt good about it. But then they call you Friday, and then they call you Sunday. And are you prepared to give that constant attention? And if you aren't, then you need to be aware of this resource, like you mentioned in the beginning of your podcast, of where they can reach out for that constant kind of feedback, because we aren't trained in that. We all want to pretend that we're great at it. We want to be there, but after a while, sometimes it'll also drag you through the mud, and we need you to also be conscious and be proactive and to be able to help yourself and love yourself the proper way so you can go and do that to others. So it's tough stuff.
It's yeah, especially for us that are not school trained in mental health and things like that. And like you said, 2004, I'd go as far as saying 2013, 14 is before they started actually recognizing the issues and starting to say, hey, we have a lot of messed up men and women now that have been to multiple and we need to start helping them. So those of us who served prior to that didn't get that help, like you said earlier. It was, hey, just go back, put your boots on, get back in the fight, or get out. And then those who got out went to a spiral. And now it's up to us to keep each other up, but also know our limits as well, because we'll hurt ourselves if we keep trying to push it and say, hey, I'm taking care of you, but not taking care of me. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I agree. You know, and again, it comes down to closure. A lot of it's just you never had to. I didn't go to any of my buddies' funerals, right? The only funeral I ever went to was actually one of my good buddies' name was Rob Kelly. It's General Kelly's son, and you're actually wearing a Travis Manion shirt. Rob Kelly's wife wrote a joint book with Travis Manion's wife called A Knock on the Door, and tells about the story of what happened. It's really brutal stuff. But Rob Kelly was killed in 2010, and I was here, so I was able to go to his funeral. But he's the only person, I've watched so many Marines and soldiers in my life, and he's the only one I've ever been to the funeral. And our closure was brutal. I tell these stories like, you know what happens when you go on patrol and your buddy gets killed? You come back and they load up his gear, and now you just have more room. Like, it's only that. And that's some brutal stuff to deal with, and you deal with that for a long time. And unless you can identify that, right? Like, I went to immense amount of therapy to voice these things, find your triggers, what's hitting you hard, what's that one story that just keeps getting you. You can't get past. It's such a roadblock. And a lot of it for me was closure. Like, I just never had that, how important it is to in your journey for healing. So, podcasts like this for me and talking about it and being aggressive and understanding, like, where am I? Feeling your feelings, right? Even for me, I'm still there. My wife drops a pot in the kitchen. I don't love sounds, and I understand that my heart's just beating a little faster, and it starts to create a little undercurrent. Okay. Then the kids got the TV on too loud. Then my dog's barking, and then she just asked me, "Do you want extra beans?" And you get mad. You're like, okay, this is what happened. I had undercurrent. The current was too strong for me. How do I get back from that, right? Your partner has to be on board with it. Hey, here's the deal. This is my triggers. This is what's going on. I don't love it right now. Stop dropping pots, but we'll get past that for now. And just being understanding of where you're at, right? Because again, we need you. This is to help others, right? You said influencing people. All you got to do is do one, to do the next. The next thing you know, 10 people are influenced, 100 people, and everyone's influenced from there. So it's the only way, but we need you, right? We need everyone there to be, their number one advocate and to understand their own views and how they're dealing with things.
Outstanding. That's a perfect point, perfect way to end this too, as the time starts to tick away here. Christian, thank you for sharing the stories of Nate Anderson, Billy Miller, Dimitrios Gavriel, and Demarkus Brown, your brothers in arms, and how their battle was. Those of you who are listening, check out the BBC special. It is a real good one, as well as the Two Champs in the Ring, that podcast show. It's a very long one, but it's a good one too. So get out there and help each other and lift each other up.